everybody, welcome back for some more developmental psychology. So for this lecture unit, we're going to talk about early adulthood and our physical, cognitive, and socio-emotional development there. So this is chapters 13 and 14. So as always, we start with our learning outcomes. And with this unit, we're really thinking of a question: are you an adult? And what makes someone an adult? So if you do say, yes, I'm an adult, why do you feel that way? Or if you say, no, I'm not an adult, what factors are stopping you from being an adult? So we have this kind of idea in our society of emerging adulthood. So it's a relatively new term. It's in those nations that are more industrialized, or we have more time for education and exploration. And it's this transition from being an adolescent to being an adult. Typically, around 25-ish or even approaching 30, we feel like we are an adult. But for many of us, we don't hit 18 and then suddenly say, I'm an adult. Some of us do feel that way. But for a lot of us, this time is an emerging stage where we're coming into our own in adulthood. We're experimenting, we're exploring. We're going through role transitions. So we're taking on new responsibilities and duties. Things like voting, graduation, and getting married are huge role transitions. Marriage is a big one in many societies. There's also things like rites of passage. So in the United States, we don't have very many rites of passage that people specifically go through, or ones that we all go through. But there are some that, people will experience. Some of them are religious, like bar mitzvahs or bat mitzvahs. Others are more cultural, quinceañera, a sweet 16. And so there are different parties or things that people will do, but it's this idea that you're moving from one stage to the next, and it's going to provide continuity and change very little with time. And I have a video linked in there of an Apache girl going through her rite of passage. So what makes someone an adult? One big reason why it's difficult for us to think we're an adult right away as soon as we turn 18 is that many of us are still going to be engaged in college education. So we're still going through and getting our education. College is really important for a lot of people, so it gives us this intellectual development, but a lot of it too is a personal and social type of identity or development. So you're interacting with people that maybe you've never met before, you're out of that little group of your own high school, and you're interacting with many different others. Or if you come back to college after being out in the world for a while, it's still interacting with different ideas, thoughts, people. And there's a lot more diversity in college. However, not everyone will go straight to college right out of high school. So people from high income backgrounds, about 81% will enroll in college, very soon after graduation. But for those from a lower income background, it's about half. This data is getting a little bit aged there, but the Pew Research Center does follow this, and we do see this discrepancy or this disparity. So there are discrepancies in enrollment. Other changes that happen as we move into adulthood, so we often do less risky behavior, so we're less likely to, smoke a cigarette while riding our bicycle and trying to jump over 8 other people that are laying on the ground, or less likely to drive around and hit mailboxes with a stick, just those risky types of behaviors. We do them less as adults. And we also are more likely to obtain financial independence. So for many people, if you ask them, are they an adult? They'll say yes if they're financially stable. And many people don't feel like they're an adult until they are paying their own bills or are living in their own home. So that financial independence. Something we can see in some individuals is a quarter-life crisis. So this is similar to what we see in midlife, but it happens in the 20s. It's this idea of adjusting to the real world and coming to understand all the daily hassles that go through. So, if your mom used to make all your dentist appointments and now you're stuck doing it, it's like a daily hassle. Or just the continuity of going to work every day, realizing you have to wake up and commute an hour each way for the rest of your life, or whatever it would be. It's kind of this, who am I? What am I doing with my life kind of feeling. So really then, when do people become adults? It's a self-perception, and so it's hard to say to someone if they are over the age of 18, no, you're not an adult. So it's kind of how you feel, but when we look, though, across our society, people often do say things like, I have a full-time job, economic independence is a big one, and taking responsibility for oneself. However, it is a complicated thing, being an adult. So if we say something like economic independence is important, if you lose your job, you're not suddenly a child. You're still an adult. Or if you don't work outside the home, you're not a child. You're still an adult. And so it's a really complicated thing, but generally above the age of 18 and meeting certain markers. So our adults is physical health. We're generally doing really well. We're peaking in our abilities. Our senses are going well. They're acute. They're working functionally very well for us. Hearing is one that we can see declines in adulthood. Most people say their hearing or their health is good. Most causes of death are things like accidents, so we're not yet hitting that chronic illness type of things. And then we do have those concerns with obesity. Lifestyle factors, though, smoking is what the book refers to as the single biggest contributor to health problems. This smoking can be firsthand smoke, so you're actually doing the smoking. It can be secondhand, like someone smoking around you. Even third-hand smoke can be a problem. So with this, it is in the furniture, in the car, on the walls, things like that. The tobacco has kind of sunk in there. So that can be an issue as well. So any exposure to smoke can be a problem. Occasional drinking, so for alcohol, occasional drinking does not seem to really affect our health. The big problem is more of a binge drinking, and we do start to see that more in that emerging adulthood stage, especially in college. So with binge drinking, we've got a definition down here. So it's how many drinks you drink in a certain period. Alcoholism is a little different. So you can binge drink at a party, but it doesn't mean you're an alcoholic. With alcoholism, you have a physical dependence or a need to drink alcohol, and this has a lot of negative health effects. Health disparities, we start to see this really kind of playing out in adulthood. So there are a lot of social factors: poverty, racism, low income, low education. All of these things can lead to lower health, and there's a lot of reasons why. So this chart will provide some of those reasons. Importantly, though, why this is so important is because we start to see these differences between people's ability to access like healthy food, healthy water, good health care. We start to see these differences really make a big impact on how their trajectory is going to be across their lifespan, even how long they're going to live. So we've had an increase in life expectancy from 1980 to this is from 2010, but really that increase in life expectancy is especially for those who are the richest people. So really haven't seen much of an increase at all, or even a little bit of a decrease, for this, for men here, pretty stable, maybe even a little bit of a decrease in life expectancy for those who are among the poorest Americans. So we've got this is cognitive information. So those are physical. Our cognitive information, Baltes is a really well-respected researcher in intelligence and in cognition with lifespan development. He said as adults, we have multi-directionality in our intelligence. So some facets are going to improve, some are going to get worse. There's a lot of inter-individual variability, so a lot of differences between people. But there is a lot of plasticity as well. So you can modify your own intelligence, you can modify your skills, you can study a new language, you can learn how to play the piano. There's a lot of plasticity involved. So people also look at intelligence across the lifespan as maybe having two different components. And so with this one, we've got fluid thinking or fluid intelligence. This is being flexible, adaptive. So if you were going to drive to work, but then you walk outside and your car has a flat, you need to come up with a new way to get there on time. So that's this flexible thinking. Crystallized thinking or intelligence is more of the facts and Jeopardy kind of knowledge. So like who was the first president of the United States? What is lingonberry, just random facts and definitions is more of our crystallized intelligence. And we can see that crystallized intelligence keeps gaining across the lifespan. The fluid intelligence, so that ability to think quickly, think on one's feet, have the answer pop into your head, sometimes we see declines with that as we move towards old age. But in our young adulthood, we're really pretty strong there in both. Our post-formal thought, so this is moving beyond Piaget, who ended with formal operations. With post-formal thought, we're really more accepting of ambiguity and understanding that a lot of things are situation dependent. So plagiarism is bad, we understand why it's bad, but there is also a lot of situations where someone might plagiarize and not realize it, or they might have specific situations in their culture where they think it's better to use the person's real words, and they think it's an insult to modify the author's words. And so there can be these times where we can maybe understand why somebody committed plagiarism. So this post-formal thought is moving beyond logic and the right answer to try to be more ambiguous. Expectations for our future. So I think of these terms all the time. The social clock. We all have a social clock. It runs in our head. It's a personal timetable. So my social clock is not necessarily the same as your social clock, but it's this idea in which we're supposed to fulfill certain goals by a certain time. So you want to get married by 25, or you want to have a kid by 35, or you want to have a 6-figure job by 40 or whatever it is. Those are your goals. It's your social clock. We also all have possible selves, and these are very unique to the individual as well, but they're things that we can hope for and things that we fear. So for me, I hope to one day be a Pinterest mom, one of those people who can just come up with the decorations for a party at a minute's notice and make them all by hand and have these gorgeous little things, but I'm not very creative and I really struggle in that way. So that's a hoped for self. A feared for self are those things that you worry that you could become. So you know they're within, it's possible that you would get there, but you're just worried about it. You don't want to get there. There's an old Saturday Night Live skit where the worst thing you could be was living in a van down by the river. And so Chris Farley would say, oh no, that's where you're going to end up, in a van down by the river. And it was awful. And that would be a feared for self. Oh, I don't want that to be me. I don't want to live in that van. Careers and work. So as we move into adulthood, many of us aren't sure where we want to go yet. We're trying to establish our career, but work is really important. We spend a lot of time there. If we don't have work, it's extremely, it can be extremely detrimental to us. If we have unemployment, we want to work, but we can't, can lead to a lot of issues. And then we're also seeing a lot more diversity in the workplace. So the careers of the future are going to have a lot more, changes, more diversity, more technology, things that your young adults are preparing for now. This moves us into more of our social aspects. And so for this, we'll talk about love and relationships for the most part, our families, things like that. Sternberg is a theorist who said that we have these different versions of love. The ideal love is in the middle there. It's consummate. So we have intimacy, we're close, we share things with each other. We have passion, which is more of that sexual attraction, and then commitment. So you want to stay in that relationship. Ideally, we would have consummate relationships. That's the goal. But we know that doesn't always happen. So you can end up with having only one aspect. So you have only passion for that person, but you don't know each other well and you don't plan to stay together. So maybe that's like a one-night stand. Or you could have only commitment. So you don't even tell each other anything. You have no passion. You don't feel it towards each other any kind of way, but you're going to stay married, gosh darn it, so we can have these different kind of components in our love. How do we select a partner? So for many of us, it is assortative mating is what becomes important. So we look for a partner that's based on similarities to us. We also look for facial symmetry. We like desirable traits to us, or being a good provider, being attractive, and we seem to do this thing called matching, where we choose people who match our own level of attractiveness. So if you were to rate people, which is a very crude method of doing things, but if you were, on a 1 to 10 scale, typically you'll see 5s match with 5s or 6s. You'll see people who we'd rate as a 10 match with like a 9 or a 10. So we kind of choose people who look like us and who have the same, skills and abilities and value, quote unquote, to what we have, which is really a crude way of doing it. But we do kind of see this matching hypothesis. For many of us, how we meet our partners, this is straight couples, but through friends and at a bar or restaurant or online. Those are the biggest ways. So it's much less likely to meet people in your first grade classroom or at church than it used to be. We used to meet people more in those ways. So if you want to meet somebody, maybe go ask your friends. Arranged marriages. So when we look cross-culturally, in India, 95% of marriages are arranged. We don't really see that as much in the United States. However, many cultures are moving away from arranged marriages, or at least are adding in some choice. It is easy to judge other cultures and say, oh, I would never want my family to pick a marriage for me, and things like that. But they could also, say, oh, I'd never want to have to find somebody myself that my parents don't even know if they're good people, or so it's always easy to judge someone else's way of living there. That New York Times video clip there is a really interesting one as well, looking at some of these arranged marriages. Establishing intimacy. So Erickson, we talked about the things, the goals that we have in our adulthood. Our Erickson stage at this point is intimacy versus isolation. So we want to learn to be intimate with people, and it's emotional intimacy as well, as well as physical. So it's not just all about engaging in sex. It's letting someone know you, letting someone in. And really, Erickson was saying it's impossible for us to have mature love if we can't let someone in. So ideally, as a young adolescent, as an early adult, we're developing our own identity, and then we develop a shared identity as an adult. This isn't always the case, though. So you'll see some people, maybe they get married really young, they're not sure yet who they are. They end up getting divorced and then go through this period of actually, who am I? I don't even know. I'm going to go through and figure out who I am. I'm going to explore and learn who I am. So, it doesn't always work in these stages exactly. Violence in relationships. just run right through that. So we know that violence is still ongoing in our relationships. An important thing too to note here, the first little graphic shows us there, is that this can happen for men as well. Men can be victims of physical and sexual and emotional violence in relationships. So this is very important to kind of realize that as well. So we've got some what the book calls lifestyles. Singlehood is one. So being a single person for life is often a gradual choice. So you typically don't see people who are 17 who say, you know what, I'm going to be single forever. I never want to get married. But typically it just happens as the life goes on and you're like, I never really found someone I wanted to marry. This can be a problem because society is often marriage oriented. And so, like tax breaks for married people, or they just assume that you have a partner, but it can be really good as well. So you have time to make decisions. You can have freedom, privacy. Cohabitation is something that many people would engage in. Sorry for the noise there. I must be getting email. But cohabitation is something we see happening more often. And so we've got a little chart here showing this rapid increase in cohabitation. But with this, you're cohabitating, you're living in the same habitat or same environment. People do this for different reasons. So sometimes they just want to see, are we compatible? Do I want to actually be with you? Do I want to get married to you? It's a trial marriage. Other times people say we're going to live together and we're never going to get married. So long-term commitment. For other people, it's just rent is really expensive. Let's move in together and save some money. So the older kind of research has suggested it has lower marital satisfaction, but with this huge increase, we really do need more work in this area to kind of see exactly what is going on with cohabitation. With gay and lesbian couples, most research shows we really have very little difference there between homosexual and heterosexual couples. However, we do see people who are LGBT plus will often report less support from family and stigma-related concerns in their relationships. Sexuality, so males will have more casual sex partners, females often more selective, and then married and cohabitating couples engage in sex more often, and most Americans do not engage in kinky sexual acts or adultery. And then sexual orientation is a continuum. So if we look at the Kinsey scale, we've got, sorry, I have a kid walking on me. So our Kinsey scale goes from 0 to 6 here, with 0 being exclusively heterosexual to all the way up to exclusively homosexual for our 6. Individuals who identify more as bisexual might be a 3, equal amount of homo and heterosexual behavior. So it is a continuum. Marriage. People are older now when they first get married. Average duration is about 9 years of marriage, and so we also see this crossover that you can look at here with this data. But we're seeing people now have their first child often before their first marriage. So the median age at first marriage then is a little bit higher than the median age at first birth. So what makes a marriage successful? Typically, we'd see certain factors. So the partners are a little bit older, more mature. The relationship is equitable. We want to avoid the 4 horsemen of the marriage apocalypse. So you definitely watch that video. But things like contempt, so kind of seeing yourself as better than your partner, this is one of the 4 horsemen. So you'd be able to watch that and really identify those. And it's important to have a good marriage. These happier people or happily married people live longer than those who are unhappily married. So if you're married, you want it to be a happy marriage. Staying happy, though, can be difficult. So this is not at all a guarantee, this chart. It looks scary. I kind of hate looking at it because I'm right about, raising children, career advancement, like right in here. So it's like, boom, around 25 years is the bottoms out. But in general, we know raising children is difficult. And so once the children are leaving home there, we're getting a little bit happier. We got some grandkids maybe. So people report being happier in their marriage. No guarantee, though, that this is going to be the case. Some couples are very happy throughout their life there. Some people will also decide never to have children on purpose. So we call these individuals child-free. They're used to be called dinks. So double income, no kids is a dink, and it was a derogatory term. But there is more societal acceptance now, and there should be. People should not be forced to raise children if they do not want to do so. So child-free, perfectly valid. If we do ask, though, most people still say they want children, but perfectly valid choice to not have children as well. The parental role is a very big one. Parenting is difficult and it's costs a lot of money. So people are having fewer children. They're waiting longer to have kids. And then for most moms, they're going to be out in the child rearing environment and in the workplace. So 70% of moms are employed. And so that often leads them still having a second shift where they go to work and they do their first shift. They come home and have to do the second shift of completing housework and child rearing type tasks. Single parenting, so this has challenges and rewards. Many couples are parenting are step, foster, adoptive parents, and then really our gay and lesbian parenting. These kids are very similar to children raised by heterosexual individuals. So very few differences between kids raised by heterosexual couples and homosexual couples. There's a lot of myths that surround parenting. So things like the birth of a child will save a failing marriage. Parenting is easy and requires no training. Oh my gosh, I wish that was the case. Good parents will always be joyful in the role. That is total myth. Sometimes you're just like, get out of my face, kid. Let me breathe my own air for 5 minutes. I just had a kid interrupt me at least twice during this video. It can be difficult. So there are a lot of myths about parenting. The important thing is just to do your best and to keep learning. But birth of a child will not save a failing marriage. And unfortunately we do see divorce happening. And so there's about a 50-50 chance of divorce, but rates are slowly declining. Predicting divorce. So these are some of the big factors. So younger at marriage, having divorced parents, having a baby before marriage, because children can be very difficult. For women, if you have a divorce, this can lead to financial problems for many women. And for men, it can be difficult to stay close to the children. But the best thing is if you can be forgiving. So kind of letting it go, letting bygones be bygones. This divorce cake here might not be the most forgiving thing in the world. She's got her husband kind of laying there at the bottom of the cake. Looks like he was pushed off. But, if you're able to forgive and move on, that's often the best kind of way to do that. And then remarriage. So getting remarried. Most people will wait a little while, about 3.5 years before getting remarried. Oftentimes people who've been divorced in the past will cohabitate, so live together without getting remarried. Partners who initiated the divorce are more likely to get remarried. Remarriages, though, have a higher percentage rate of divorce than first marriages. So your first marriage is less likely to end than your second or third or fourth. We think this is because people know how to get a divorce. They've been through it. They know that they can survive it. And so they're more willing to engage in it if their needs are not necessarily being met. This is our last slide for this unit. And so with this one, this is for our attachment. So if you remember back to talking about attachment with little kids, we have a first relationship there with our parents. And so we learn to trust that parent or to not trust that parent, unfortunately. And that attachment will move us, help us understand what to expect from social relationships throughout the rest of our lives. So we don't always have our relationship partner or our parent, or, they're not always with us there. So what we instead develop is a working model. And so we go through life with this working model of I'm a good person or I'm a bad person, and other people are trustworthy or other people are not trustworthy. And we've developed that through those early interactions with our parents, but we apply it to relationships down the line. This is the theory, anyway. Attachment is a theory. But you'll be able to kind of see these styles that we talked about with little kids, how they kind of move into adulthood there. So with thoughts of the self that are positive, we get more of a secure relationship if we have positive thoughts of the other. So I'm okay, you're okay, kind of is more of a secure attachment. If people think they're okay, but other people are not to be trusted, we get more of this dismissive attachment. So they rely on the self and they don't let others in. If you think that you're not good without anyone else, so your partner's a good person, they're great, but you are awful, that's how you feel. That's a preoccupied style, so those people need to be in a relationship. And then if you think, I'm a bad person and other people are bad and untrustworthy as well, then that's more of a fearful style. So that's a very difficult stage to be in. And attachment can be modified, so it does develop in those early relationships with our parents, but we can work on developing a more secure attachment over time, through therapy, through, having good relationships, strong relationships with other people who treat us well and who help us heal from past issues. But that gets us through. So a lot of adulthood material. We got through the physical, the cognitive, and the social aspects. And I'll see you again for discussing more midlife.